Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Today, we sit down with a huge advocate of women in construction. She herself has lived in a world of construction and the skilled trades. Coralee Beatty joins us on the show today to share with us her journey through the skilled trades. From a young age, Coralee loved construction. Something about the smell of the wood, how the sound echoed through the empty walls, and premonitions of who might occupy the future house. She just loved it, every aspect of it. However, her journey took her to university instead, where she studied psychology. She pivoted then to the trade school just a half a year shy of completing. After trade school, she spent the next 10 years at a business envelope consulting firm, and then the next 15 years growing a mechanical business with her husband. She sold the business, but not her passion for helping people. So her next step was to start a coaching business in Thrive HQ, focusing specifically on women in construction. Tune in to hear how Coralee pursued her passions to live a life of success by her definition and what she's doing to change the industry forever. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. As always, this show's not monetized and we don't run ads. We rely strictly on word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So if you enjoy this episode, please take a second to rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it. They depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Coralee Beatty. Welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Coralee, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. As you know, as my audience knows, I'm a huge advocate for women in and around the industry, and it's my understanding that you're pretty involved in that yourself. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. But before we go down that road, why don't you kind of tell our audience who you are and where you come from and how you got to where you are today?
Okay. So my name's Coralee, and I am a mom of four. I am a business owner. Not obviously, but I am married. And my journey started, in my whole life, I've always loved construction. It was always something that I was just really interested in. And back in my day, in the community that I was living in, it was just coming up. It was a new subdivision, and all these construction sites were just open for kids to wander onto because they didn't have safety fences and stuff. So I would wander on, and I'd walk through these empty houses, and I'd hear the sound of when I walk up the stairs, and it's the sound of like the rough framing, just the hollow sound, and just looking around and imagining what this place was going to be like when people were living in it and how it was going to come together, and the smells. I just loved all that stuff. And I would play on the outside in the gravel and poking at the damp proofing, which of course back in those days is like tar. So I'd get like black tar all over my hands, but it was so satisfying, just popping the little bubbles. And, fast forward, like when I was a teenager, I loved doing floor plans and designing houses and looking at houses. It was always something I enjoyed. However, when I graduated from high school, it was never an option. Like, it just wasn't a consideration for me to pursue a career in the construction industry. It was nothing that was like, there wasn't people around me that were involved in the industry. So it just wasn't something I was exposed to. And it certainly wasn't something that, at school I heard about. So I just automatically, of course, went into taking psychology because I wanted to help people. And that's what you did. So it was probably in my fourth year of university where I was just like, what am I doing? Like, it was just, I recognized that the people I wanted to help, which was youth in the criminal justice system, I was like, I can't identify with these people. I've had this nice little life and I don't understand these people. Like, I just didn't. So I kind of started to question whether or not I could actually be effective. And what I also was learning is that the emotional component of working with kids that have had a horrible life was overwhelming. Like, it's just not something you can leave at the office. So that's when I left university And I was like, so what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, I'm going to go into construction. Why don't I? It was something that I was just like, I've always loved it. And it was kind of, a few years later, and it was a realization that I could just do this. So I went to technical school, and it was the first time in the history of my school career that I actually loved what I was learning. I was learning how to wire a house, how to frame a house, how to do plumbing in a house. Like, just, it was so exciting for me. I was just like, I love this stuff. So I finished my schooling, and I was a building envelope consultant for the first 10 years of my, career, I guess. And my husband is a plumber by trade, and he started a company sort of around, 5 or 6 years into my 10 years, and I worked with him part-time. When I was pregnant with our second child, I retired from the engineering firm that I was working with, and I acted as a general contractor for building our own family house, which I loved. We had notwithstanding the fact that we built it during the crash of the housing industry, we lost 20% in the value of our assessment from pre-construction to post-construction. It was devastating, but we did it. We survived it. And so other than that little detail, it was a really good experience. And I look forward to building future houses again for us. But notwithstanding, we did that. And then that's when I started working full-time with my husband in his business. And
that was a plumbing business?
We were full mechanical. So we did plumbing, heating, hydronic heating, as well as forced air, cooling, gas, kind of did all that stuff. And we had that business for 15 years. And there was a lot of craziness that happened because the first couple of years was amazing. It's just like we had cash coming in, and it was easy and nice. It's just like, we got this because, I'm like a master organizer, and I was in construction, so I had some background, and I did project management. So, you look at it and think, oh, this is going to be easy. Except then we started to grow and get more employees. And it gets to that point that if you're not familiar with how a business runs, it can take over your life. And that's what happened with us. Like, it really did take over our life a lot. And it became very stressful.
How many employees did you guys get up to?
We got up to 18 guys plus our office people. And I say guys because we never had the opportunity to employ females. So we did get up to 18 plus office staff.
That's a hard point in a business. Is that threshold between 15 and 20?
Well, actually, for us, it was probably a little bit smaller than that. That was the tough part, because the volume of our work was more of a dollar value that we attached to that transition. And it was kind of between the $1 million and $2 million mark that was really difficult for us, because you're too small for some things and too big for other things. Yeah. So that for us was it was more of the revenue that was causing the problem. Well, not causing the problem, but that was sort of the measure that we had for where the challenge existed for us. When we were able to get past that $2 million mark, it's like, okay, things became more manageable. But in that same time, that's when we also got our processes in place and our systems in place and organized our business. So that was kind of the thing that brought us to be able to grow, to be bigger, and to do it more smoothly and a little bit more, with a little bit more sanity. I mean, it was still challenging because no matter, what we were doing, we still had more work than we could really service effectively. So my husband was working on the tools a lot more than we wanted him to be. And it was stressful as far as it was not sustainable for his health. It just wasn't. So, we had the systems in place, but it was still difficult because as business owners, we are ultimately the ones that are responsible for our customers. That's the way we saw it. And so it would be us that would be servicing our customers when everybody else was kind of flat out. So, we had that business for 15 years. We ended up selling it back in 2017. And, it was a good decision for us. It was a good transition, but it was a point at which I was like, okay, what am I going to do next? I knew that I loved the construction industry, and I knew that that's what I really enjoyed. And I also knew that almost anybody would hire me. People I talked to were like, oh, like everybody would offer me a job. And it's just like, I need to make the right decision for me. And what is it going to look like? So it was 2.5 years of some really difficult times. Like the first 6 months were great. It's just like freedom and holidays and all the stuff, it was great. But, after the 6 months, and now I'm starting to think, okay, what am I going to do? And who am I now that I'm not that business owner? Because you identify what your identity is attached to that. Yeah. When my identity was no longer attached to that business, it really became a struggle. And there were some very dark days in those 2.5 years when I just didn't know and I was really struggling. And then it just was one morning, something, it was like this light bulb went off for me. And it's like, I wanted to coach people, like right from my very beginnings when I went to psychology, because I wanted to help people. That's what I still wanted to do. And so I thought I'll be a life coach for women and help them find that fire again that, that we lose as being a mom and a wife and running people around. And we kind of lose all of our own interests. That's where my interest started, was doing that. And I thought I'd work with women business owners because I could, I was a woman business owner and I know what it's like to lose that and your identity and all those things. And then sort of as it progressed, I recognized that I really missed the business component of what I was doing. I really liked the systems. I liked the processes. I liked being able to identify things and just put them into structures and boxes and, have things organized. That was kind of what I really enjoyed about our business stuff. So I was like, well, what I'll do is, business coach for women, because as a woman, as a business owner, you're not escaping your life. It's kind of married. Those two things go together. And so I knew that if I was working with women business owners getting their foundations of their business sorted out, I would also be able to help them with their life coaching aspect. So I was like, this is perfect. So then, of course, it, continued to grow and figure out, I could pick any niche that I wanted to work with. And, I could have found one where there was a lot of women. And so I had like a big pool to choose from. But that wasn't true to me.
Sure.
Like that's not who I was. Like you could have serviced, women in spas or women in, a financial planning, whatever it happened to be. But I knew that my people were women in construction. That's who I was. That's who I am. That's who I understand. That's who I connect with. And I knew that that's who I needed to work with, not just because I was one of them and I understood them, but also because they're underserved.
Yeah.
Wherever we go, we are one of one, there's not many, especially as business owners. So I really wanted to get into that and work with women specifically in construction to help them build that foundation and create a space where they weren't by themselves. Create a space where they're with like-minded women, where we can empower each other and feed off each other and just, create that community that we're not alone and hopefully gain momentum with what's possible for women in the industry. Anyway, long story, but that is kind of where I started, where I am, and what I'm doing.
No, that's a fantastic story and very well told. I can tell it's very well told because I have a ton of questions. No, it's really great. And I love hearing stuff like that because, when I hear stories like this, I hear something that I preach, right? It's that, a career in a field where most people aren't taught to look, men and women, can lead you towards a passion that, you didn't know you had. And I think that that's, evident here with the story that you told, being interested in construction, but ultimately going to school for psychology to help people, right? And then, being able to build a business the way that you did and, move on to the next chapter of your life, full circle back to helping people and coaching women. So I think it's a great story. So first off, when you were younger, I really liked the way that you described to me, because one of my questions was why would you love construction the way that you did, and so when you got into, whenever anybody says, I love the smell of it, you know, it's the passion coming out, right?
Yes.
and the fact that I could visualize when you were telling me that story, what it is that you loved, being able to imagine who was going to live in that house. I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff, so, I mean, I have to ask was this something that, did you have parents that were in construction or were you raised around construction, or was this something that just kind of organically came to you once you discovered it?
It was completely organic, because there was I think my grandfather, who lived on the opposite side of the country, I think in his early days, he may have done some building and some developing, but it was nothing I even knew about until I was well into my construction industry career. And I was just like, oh, I didn't even know that.
Wow.
But my parents were not in construction. People around me were not. I didn't know anybody in the industry. Nobody. It was being in that space. It was just like, it just felt so good. I remember like I was 6 or 7 years old, and now in fast forward in the years when I actually got onto construction sites and when I was with the engineering firm, even the smells then. And it's funny because I love the smell of cutting steel studs, and it's that burning smell of metal. And it's like, that doesn't smell good. And when I first smelled it, I'm like, oh, what is that? And, so it's just something that is a little odd. However, it just is something that, and maybe it's just because I am in that construction space and I just love everything around the feeling of it that, kind of creates that love of the smells. I don't know.
So that's really awesome. And I love hearing stuff like that. So, I'm curious, and this isn't going to be a question for when you were 6 or 7, because when you're 6 or 7, you have no care in the world. You like what you like, you know what you like, and that's the end of it. You don't care who else says what, right? But fast forwarding to your teenage years where you said, you began to get interested in floor plans of houses and stuff like this. So in your teenage years, did you ever, I don't know how I want to word this, but being a woman and, being attracted to those things, were you hit with any kind of adversity? I mean, do people kind of look at you funny at all and say, hey, why are you interested in this?
Yeah, not really, because when I was going through that phase of loving the floor plans and, designing houses and looking at all this stuff, and my best friend at the time, she also loved it. So the two of us would look at it together. So as far as we were concerned, we were completely normal, and all good. And, in drafting class, I used to, because there was a drafting class when I was in junior high that I took, and I really loved that. Like, it was like, I get to create these house plans and stuff, and I loved it. And I think it may have been, I'm just trying to think of the point at which it shifted where, and it could have been just a change of groups. Like my friend and I were, when we moved into high school, so grade 10, we did different things. She went one way, I went another way, and it could have just been a new group of friends that shifted that interest away where I didn't do it as much anymore. Is probably what happened, because in those years, of course, you become more peer oriented, and the people I was around at that time, again, construction wasn't a thing that they were in.
I see. Okay. Well, then, of course, fast forwarding a little bit more, moving on from high school to university, you said there was very little, if any, consideration, for a woman being in that field. Right. So at that point, you had to have kind of raised an eyebrow at it and said, well, maybe there's something wrong here, right?
That was probably when I was after I realized going through university, and the point at which I did decide to pursue the career in construction. It was at that point where I started questioning it. Like, why didn't I think about this earlier? What was it that stopped me from considering it? Because it really wasn't anything that I considered. And maybe it was just a lack of exposure still, because again, I didn't have anybody around me doing it. And it comes back to that thing, when you don't see people like you or close to you doing it, it's hard to picture yourself doing it. So it very much could have come down to that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So on the topic then of high school and university or college transition, what do you think that we could do, either as an industry or as advocates ourselves, to get this word out, basically, that the skilled trades or construction or, any industry within that realm, is an actual career and not just a job?
It's interesting, because I think that by the time a lot of us get to high school or even transitioning into post-secondary of whatever sort, I think for a lot of people, it's too late at that point. I think, you're set in your ways. You have your ideas of what construction looks like, whether it be tradespeople or, design or whatever it is. I think you have your ideas of what it looks like. And I think at that point, sure, there's going to be some people that are interested. And I think getting into the school and supporting the people who are already interested in it is important, to support them to carry on to do it. However, I think in order to really make an impact on the number of people considering it, at that high school level or going into university or post-secondary is getting them younger.
Hmm.
You know, what's possible like when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, putting the tools in your hands, feeling it. What can you build? What's possible? Like when I was 6 or 7 years old, when I was getting on those construction sites and just loving it and collecting the nails and all that stuff. You know, I think it is planting the seeds when they're young of what's possible. By the time university or high school comes around, I think we all are kind of set in our ways of what we believe is right or wrong. Like if somebody came into my school when I was in high school and was promoting a career in construction, that may have brought me back like, oh, well, that's a good idea. But I don't think it's the point at which you can plant the seed. I think it's either there or it's not. And you can either help them develop it and move on, or shifting. I think shifting the ideas at that point is challenging.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So developing a perception at an early age is of the utmost importance if we want to increase the number of people that are interested in the trades to begin with.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so.
It makes a lot of sense. You know, I did a podcast with, I'm not sure if you know Jamie McMillan, Kick-Ass Careers.
Yes.
So she's got that book, All the Kids on Builder Street.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's awesome. And then I had another podcast with Paige Knowles, who's amazing. I don't know if you saw that podcast.
I haven't yet. No, with she's the plumber, right?
Yeah. She's the plumber. She's like a year out of high school, and she already has a children's book published called How to Change a Shower Head. You know, okay. So we have a great collective, and we need more, obviously. Yes. But we have a great collective of people kind of sharing that same mindset, and it's funny, right? Because growing up in high school, I was kind of in the same boat. I didn't know about the trades. I didn't really. It's sad to say, but I didn't really care about the trades because I didn't know about the trades. It was all taken for granted, right? And it wasn't until I got into the trades that I was able to see the opportunities that existed. And then, you know, when I was looking for more resources on the skilled trades and what they were, that, you know, it's hard to find. They're hard to find. So that's when I wrote the book and geared towards high school students, right? And it's funny because after talking with my publisher and after the book was released and all of that, it wasn't until then that I realized, you know, a better follow-up to this book would be something that I could present to kids even younger, you know, middle school, even elementary school, you know, just something to put in their hands to say, hey, you know, this is an option. Right. And that's all we're saying is that it's an option.
There is actually, have you heard of the other, let me just reach down here for a second. I'm going to grab because I have it handy. Have you heard of the book, The House That She Builds? Because it's also another kid's picture book that I have on my desk. That's another book this one's by Molly Elkman and Georgia Castellano. It's another one. But I agree. And I actually bought a bunch of these and donated them to my local libraries because I think that I agree that that's the place it needs to be is younger. Like if you can start seeing yourself in these shoes and that other women are doing it, then it creates a whole world of possibilities.
Yeah. And that's the other element, right? The element that you focus on, because, you know, the element that I focus on is the trades as a whole and just, you know, the up and coming generations, men and women, you know, not knowing what the benefits are, but the women in the industry is just another level, right? Because the industry as a whole, it isn't advertised towards women, it isn't geared towards women or marketed towards women, you know, and it's kind of accepted over the years that this is man's work, right? For lack of a better term, you know, and nothing could be further from the truth, you know, especially in this day and age. And it's just amazing because in the same breath, in the same sentence, everybody is saying, well, the skilled trade shortage, you know, we don't have enough people. Yet 50% of the world population is being disregarded.
Underrepresented.
Underrepresented. Exactly. Yes. So it's amazing, you know, so that's why I love, you know, talking to people like you. But anyway, I'm going down a rabbit hole here. So I'm going to reel it back in. So, after you went to school for psychology, so did you end up graduating university or did you leave university to pursue?
I didn't. I left university like I think I had half a year left or something. It was kind of like a hard stop. It was just like, this is not it.
Wow.
It was a hard stop. And within 2 weeks, I left university and was into, because the program I wanted to get into at my technical school was usually full, but they actually had a spot. So I ended up, it was like already the beginning of the year, it was the beginning of September. So I started in university, had the hard stop, and switched over going to school full time because I was doing university part time at the time, working part time, university part time, and then full stop in that whole thing. And then I shifted into technical school, which was full time. And I started 2 weeks into their program. So it was like catch up I had to play, but loved it. Loved it.
That's great. And then so as soon as you graduated tech school, that's when you went to work for the engineer?
Right.
Engineering firm?
Yeah. It's a building envelope consultant.
Building envelope consultant, right. And how long were you working there?
Notwithstanding having a couple of kids, was 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then at which point, then after that is when you began building the business with your husband. Is that right?
That's when I moved full time into the business with my husband, because he did have it. And we had, I think, maybe 2 or 3 employees at the time when I switched over to working full time with him.
Okay.
Maybe a couple more, but I was doing part-time stuff while I was working at the engineering firm, and then did the switch.
Got it. Okay. And what did you love about working at the engineering firm? I mean, you were there for 10 years, right? So
yeah,
you had to enjoy it.
I did. Well, I love construction. I love project management. I was able to be on construction sites. I was able to administer contracts, and I just love being able to do things that are sequential. It was organized. It was a well-established firm, and they were flexible. They really were good and a really good employer. They had great people working there. I wasn't the only female. They really did have quite a few female engineers working with us. So it was a good environment, and I really enjoyed the work. I did enjoy doing project management.
Awesome. All right, cool. And then so getting into the business aspect of things, I'm a business owner, myself, and I understand the trials and tribulations that come with it, and also the sense of accomplishment, right? Because that's why we do it, right? I mean, it's hard. Everybody knows that it's hard at this point, and but we endure, because of what it can give us, right? We can step back and see what we've built. So what did you love most about the business ownership?
We were a good employer. We really cared about our people. And what mattered to me most is that kind of part of our mission was to make our employees' lives better because they worked for us. And I knew that we were doing that. We paid them as much as we could. We gave them benefits like, sick leave. They had sick leave. They had bereavement leave. We had tool allowances, and we would buy them one boot. We'd pay 50% of, their boots and uniforms. Like we took care of them. We paid for their medical. We took care of our people. And that was what was most important to me, was being able to provide a job for people, but also a career where we could help develop them. We would have meetings with them twice a year. We would be laying out their plans. What do you want your career to look like? How are we going to get there? And I would, with everybody we'd have like a place for them where we were aiming to bring them. And so for me, it was really about our people, and giving them the best opportunity to be the best tradesperson that they could be. And really proud of the people that we developed through our business, because we took some people who, we took on a lot of apprentices. Sure, it'd be nice to hire the top skilled people, but I tell you, hands down, the best tradespeople we had working for us were the people that we brought up from being an apprentice, like just watching them grow and literally grow. I remember our first employee, he came to us when he was, 23 or something, 24 maybe. And he was a skinny kid with, he's tall and he was smart, but right out of foundations program. So he didn't have much experience. And we turned him into a really incredible tradesperson. He had his own business until COVID. He ended up becoming a long hauler and had to close down his business because of his medical condition from COVID. But he was an incredible tradesperson, just really smart, really, really talented. And to see the growth in him, and then also he's almost 40 years old now. I think he must be. He's not that skinny little kid anymore. So it is kind of funny to see them grow into men. Like it is like there was one kid that we had who was 18. Like we actually hired him when he was still in. It was a trades program that they had at high school, and so part of it was it's not an internship because he was paid for it, but it was like a working session, whatever. So we hired him for that. And he was with us for, I think, a year and a half or something before we ended up selling the business. But again, just seeing them grow as people is really satisfying.
Yeah, that's a really rewarding part of business done right, especially in the trades,
Yes.
and you know too that, the trades have developed a pretty subpar reputation in the past, and so whenever you hear about a company like that focuses hard on the culture and the people, I think that any business that does that is helping to change that narrative. So really really cool stuff there.
And that's one of the biggest things I talk about with anybody and everybody that I talk to is really recognizing that there is a shift. Like the people coming up, you can't treat them the way we treated people 10, 15 years ago. They're not going to take it. They, they have a little bit more pull, if you want to say, as far as, they're high demand, and they demand to be treated properly. And I think it's great because it will change. That next generation coming through is just going to change the look of the industry. And although for me, because I'm from the generation where it's just like, you have a job, just go to your job. Like, why do I have to say, great job for doing your job? But, so that was definitely a shift in the mindset for me in dealing with the next generation and being an effective leader and appreciating them. It's a lot of learning, and it's worth it because you also grow as a person. Like, okay, like I make them feel good by appreciating what they're doing, even though it is their job. Yeah. And then you can just see them light up or lift up or feel better. Or it's like, oh, I did okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. 'Cause you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the way that I was raised, even though I'm younger and I'm of, technically I'm a millennial, but don't tell anyone. But that's the way that I was raised, in a very old school mentality, like that. And my dad is like that in a lot of ways, but to his credit, he's been able to, adjust to kind of that same way of thinking. Right. And you could see, I mean, it still comes out, right. But it's usually met with like, oh, okay, wait.
Well, it's true. Sometimes I still find myself rolling my eyes, but I'm just like, you know what? It is, like I said, it is personal growth for me. Like I recognize how things have changed, and it feels good to be able to grow as a human, to be able to appreciate those things.
It does. And it speaks volumes for the people in the industry, because again, I talk to a lot of people on the show. I think you're probably my 117th guest or something like that. Wow. And so I've talked to a lot of people, and I got to tell you, like 90% of them care so much about the people in the industry, or the people that they work with, both young and old. And that's telling, right? Because at that point you want to be able to develop somebody. You don't want to roll your eyes. You don't want to think ill of anything, or think anybody's entitled, or any of those things. And so I think it's still going to take some time, but we're trending in the right direction.
I think so.
Yeah. So all right, let's get back on track. So after you sold the business, the business that you identified with so much that you kind of lost your identity after you didn't have it anymore. At least that's what it sounded like, right? And then so the light bulb went off in your head to be a coach, to help women. This was the initial thought, right? Help women by way of being a life coach. Did it start off with women in business, or did it evolve into women in business?
It started out with women in business because, again, that was me. I was a woman in business that got lost in my business, got lost as a mom, got lost as, charting everything around and being a wife and doing all the things that you do. That was, I could identify with that. Again, it comes back to being able to identify with it. And so it was, from the beginning, women in business. And then what I recognize is that, well, why don't I do the business part? Because that's actually the part that I really like.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense. So then it transitioned into women in construction,
Mm-hmm.
and I imagine that now. So this is what you're doing up until this day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I imagine now you're able to feel that sense of accomplishment, that satisfaction, or that reward, right? When you're helping these women navigate their careers. And so I'm curious. I mean, and I don't want you to name any names or anything, but do you have any success stories of examples that you could give of someone who was looking for help and you were able to give it to them?
Yeah, and it is interesting because, like I said earlier, about bringing those two things together of being a business coach and, a life coach, because you can't really separate those two things as being a business owner. And we work on universal business concepts. It's really foundational things that we work on to help, because those are things that we often don't put into place when we start in our construction or trades business, especially as the person who is the skill. So I've helped people understand what business looks like and what a well-run business looks like, and working on different components of it. However, my most satisfaction really comes out of the personal growth that I see in the people that I work with, because a huge part of what we work on is mindset. I say this all the time. It's just the two things that I see most in the women that I work with is a lack of confidence and the fear. And when we can talk about those things and uncover what's, under those, and really get to a level of awareness that helps them create strategies and coping mechanisms so when they recognize these things coming in, it doesn't stop them. They can keep moving forward, because that's often what happens, is that if you don't recognize what's happening, you freeze and you don't move forward. And just the aha moments, it's just like, oh yeah, that they experience. And that is almost all the women that I work with, where they have those challenges, and just kind of giving them, asking them the questions. That's kind of where the coaching part comes in, asking them the questions that help them understand themselves a little bit better and have an awareness. It's really the level of awareness of what they've achieved to get to where they are, because I'm going to say 100% of the time, women aren't giving themselves the credit that they deserve for the journey that they went through to get to where they are. And it's really helping them acknowledge that. And that's pretty satisfying.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like, I bet you meet some incredible people, in what you do.
Absolutely. And because I kind of work with women in two different areas. One is with established businesses, and then women who are in the trades who are interested in starting their own business, but they're not sure how, or they don't know what that looks like, or if they can even do it. So that's the place where I see most of the challenges, because a lot of women who are in an established business, they still have the imposter syndrome and those things that we talk about a lot. But that fear and confidence is really, really strong. Fear and lack of confidence, shall I say, is really strong in women wanting to make that transition. So that's where I see a lot of it. And with those women in an established business, it's more of the imposter syndrome and the fear of making changes within their businesses. What if it doesn't work? What if I fail? All those things that we say to ourselves. So really, it's just, that part is really quite satisfying.
Yeah, it really sounds like it. Well, that is such a storied journey and career up until this point, Coralee. So I'm excited to kind of follow you and see where this goes, but so I don't have to just yet. I'm going to ask you, where do you see this going? I mean, do you have plans to keep this status quo? Do you want to grow, expand your reach? I mean, what's next?
Status quo does not exist in my language.
So. I didn't think. I had a hunch.
I homeschool my kids. I've always just done things differently. I've always kind of just been different, and I've never felt the need to fit into anybody else's box. And I am really passionate about the industry right now, because I feel like there's a lot of excitement, because it is desperate times. Like, we have a serious labor shortage, not just with women being underrepresented, like just across the board, we need more bodies. And I am connecting with so many people who are as passionate about advocating for the industry, like educating people. I'm really excited about the connections in the groups and of people that are doing the same thing. And I think if we all kind of band together and become a louder voice, I really am hopeful and optimistic that the next 5 years is going to be a significant change versus the previous 30. Like there hasn't been much change in the last 30 years. That's kind of what made me get to where I am and what I'm doing. It's just that I look, when I finished high school 30 years ago, it wasn't there. 10 years ago, still not. 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, not much. Like it's just not enough. Yeah. And I'm really hopeful with the amount of passion that surrounds us in so many different areas. I'm hopeful that we see an increase in not just the women, but people in general who appreciate what the trades and what construction really does have to offer.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And, obviously that's the whole reason I do what I do. And I know that's a big reason of you doing what you do. So well said. And so anyway, we're going to wrap things up here, but I do have one more question for you. But before I ask that question, do you have anything else that you wanted to touch on or talk about?
No, I just want to, for women specifically, I just want to put out there that if you have any ideas or thoughts of whatever it is that you want to do, anything is possible, like whatever it is. And I think that really stops women from pursuing, whether it be a career in construction or starting a business or whatever it happens to be. Just don't limit yourself. It's all in your head. It's all in your head.
Such great advice. Such great advice. I would echo that. Absolutely. Okay. So I talk a lot about success and the skilled trades and how the skilled trades can be used as a catalyst to whatever or however you define success, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes that evolves as we get older, right? And our definition of success, mine when I was younger was to be a street racer. That was my idea of success. That would be awesome, right? Fast forward, I've got kids. My success is different now.
Yes.
So I like to ask people at the end of this show how they define success and how the skilled trades are helping them live it. So I'm asking you, Coralee, how do you define success and how are the skilled trades now helping you to achieve it?
I define success as feeling whole and complete. And whatever it is that you're doing that makes you feel that's what's important. And when you can reach that level of happiness and completeness and satisfaction, to me, that's success, whatever that looks like for each person. But that, when I have those feelings, that's success to me. And for the trades, I think for me specifically, I feel so fulfilled and so very fortunate for the journey that I've been on to give me the experience that I have to be able to help the women that I can help. Because I know that one of the biggest struggles is not having support, not knowing where to go, not having somebody there to really guide you, to show you, to keep you accountable, all of those things. And now I have the opportunity because I was in those shoes. And to me, that's really important. To me, I need to know that I get these people, I can identify with them. I was there. And it's really important for me to be able to do that in order to genuinely help them. And I know that I can. And so I feel really fortunate that I can provide this for people who otherwise there's not a lot of options for.
Well said. Well said. Great. Well, for those that don't know, where can people find you?
So you can check me out on my website. That's thrivehq.ca. And I'm on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram. I guess Clubhouse is also considered a social media. And Facebook, all at Coralee Beatty. I'm one of one. I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Well, Coralee, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with me today. I know my audience is going to appreciate it.
I truly appreciate your time. Thank you.